Hello and welcome. My name is Tommy. I'm a surf coach in Playa Guiones Nosara, which is in Costa Rica. And this lesson, this tutorial is going to be first of part of a series on how to cross step and nose ride. So if you're interested in any of the following lessons, please do subscribe or follow us. I'll also be talking about frontside and backside cross stepping. I'll be talking about stance. We'll be discussing footwork, and we'll also be going through nose riding. So in today's theory on setting up nose rides, we're going to be talking about positioning on the wave, which is a huge topic to discuss, but I'm going to try and make it as simple as possible and break it up into two clear themes. We're going to be talking about taking off in trim, bottom turning into trim. We're going to be talking about stalling, fading the takeoff, and cutting back, sorry. All different methods of trying to set up nose rides. So without further ado, let's talk about positioning in the wave, because most people I talk to when we're discussing nose ride, and a lot of the theories or lessons or tutorials that I've seen online say that it's important to have water pressing on the tail of your surfboard in order to give you stability to nose ride. So the idea is that this downward force here gives you stability to stand on the front of your surfboard. However, I'm going to argue that that is not what we need. It can help us, especially on onshore days, like this example you see here, but it's actually detrimental to try and do that in perfect conditions or in, barreling offshore steeper waves. And actually we're relying on two other main things to help us nose ride. This example here, I like this one because the surfer's pretty comfortable on the nose of his surfboard here, and there are moments where you can see all the way to the tail of the board, and there's no water being pressed down on the back, but he's still stable on the nose. This example here of a perfect wave, as I discussed earlier, is Carniella Stewart at the Surf Ranch. There's no water on the back of his board. There's no water anywhere on his board, and actually there's two other things that are helping give him lift or help give him stability. So I want to talk about those two things, and we'll talk about them right here. We've got the apparent flow of water coming up the wave face. As a wave of energy travels through the ocean until it's white water or until it's broken, there is no water moving forwards. The wave is traveling forwards towards the beach, or it's traveling forwards through the ocean, but none of the water itself is pushing forwards. And what I mean by that is, if I just highlight or circle this little ripple here, you can see the discoloration in the water. If we play this video forwards, it's going to rise up and out of the circle. Okay, and all those ripples in the water seem to show that the water is moving up the face. Okay, that's because the surfer's coming down the hill. Okay, if you're on a skateboard and you're going down the hill and you look down at the ground, it looks like the ground is coming up. And that's what we're going to be using. We're going to be using that idea of an apparent flow of water in order to trap that flow of water underneath our surfboard. And it's going to do two things for us. So if that flow of water is coming up the face here, it's being trapped underneath his surfboard, a lot of it is going to get sent out the back or out the side of the surfboard. Okay, and because Bernoulli's theory, opposite and equal reactions, because it's being sent out the back of the surfboard, it's going to mean that the surfboard is propelled forwards. Okay, it's going to give you more speed. Speed equals momentum equals stability, so it's going to mean a little bit more stability when you're surfing. So that's great if we want to try and cross step or we want to try and nose ride. The other thing that's going to happen is, because the rails of longboards, most longboards, especially classic ones, are very round most of the way through the surfboard, water is very good at gripping hold of round surfaces. It's the Coanda effect. And if this is happening on the other side, then that means that the water is wrapping around the rail and grabbing hold of that rail. In addition to that, pulling the surfboard into the wave, and meaning that the wave is you can literally think of it as grabbing hold of the surfboard and keeping it stable. So we've got those two things going on, and they're going to help give you lift in order to be stable on the front of your board, or in order to walk towards the front of your surfboard. Now, it's very hard to see that from beach cameras, but from aerial cameras, we get a really good view of this. This is Mike Leonusa, a really great surfer, and especially as the clip comes through here, we can see that that surfboard is being sucked into the wave. It's actually gone behind the wave, okay? And that means that the water's gripping hold of the board and giving him stability. There's another example, just to show you that this was not a fluke, of Mick Rogers here, and that surfboard being pulled into the wave. So we've got those two things giving us lift. And as surf coaches, it's very useful to be able to see visual cues when we see surfers setting themselves up for any kind of maneuver, but in this case, nose rides. Now, some of my favorite visual cues to look at, now we're ignoring the idea of water slapping down on the tail of the board, okay? I like to look at what's in front of the surfer. And if we see this feathering effect, sometimes on offshore days where the light is coming from behind the camera, you'll see sparkles. We know that that is the steepest part of the wave. And that's a great thing to see, the steepest part of the wave before it's breaking. And that's a really good thing to see, and here's why. If I was to cross-section this part of the wave, where the surfer is now, okay, take a big old chunk out of the wave and spin it sideways, what I would see is something a little bit like this, okay? And if he's in the steepest part of the wave, where he is, without it being broken, that idea of an apparent flow of water coming up the face, we can visualize that his surfboard is going to trap that flow of water underneath the surfboard really effectively in this top part of the wave, as opposed to being down bottom where it's very hard to trap the flow of water. I'm just going to add 3 fins to both boards. He's not on a thruster, but I'm going to add 3 fins just so you can visualize the surfboards coming nose towards you. And that's pretty much what's going on, or nose away from you, either way you like it. So at the top of the wave, great opportunity to trap that water underneath the board. It's going to give him speed. It's also going to help that Coanda effect and that idea of the water coming around the rail, grabbing hold of the surfboard and pulling it, literally pulling it into the wave this way in order to give him stability. So I really do like to look for that visual cue of the feathering, and in particular I like to see surfers not setting up in that position but setting up behind the feathering so that they can travel through that steep section and nose ride, as opposed to setting up in it and traveling out of it. So hopefully all of that makes sense. As we go through this next clip, I want us to think about where we don't want to set up. Okay, so Jeff here is thinking about nose riding, but he's gone through that steep section and he's now leaving it. There's just a tiny bit of feathering and he's past it now. So he's now out and onto the shoulder of the wave, and that is not a great place to try and nose ride. It is doable. We'll talk about that when we discuss cross-stepping and nose riding outside of trim, which is outside of these series. But essentially, if we're to look at this part of the wave here, unlike the last diagram I drew, the wave would look something like that. Okay, so we've got that flow of water coming up the face. It's pretty obvious that it's just not as good a position for you to trap that flow of water underneath the surfboard, which means less speed, which means less water wrapping around the rail, and ultimately it means in not achieving a nose ride. And I'll see this a lot with surfers, and after discussing with them why they chose to cross step, where they chose to cross step and why they chose to not cross step, it's all down to 2 things. Here goes Paz, and she's in a great place to start cross-stepping. There isn't really a section for us to nose ride in front of, but it's a good steep section for her to practice a few steps. Now, there is a great section setting up in front of her. what happens when someone is moving fast or the wave is moving fast is they feel a little bit panicked and they worry about their stability, and often they'll try and go around these sections. They'll end up on the shoulder and they'll have this sensation of this sensation of slowing down, which is the wave slowing down, and they'll then think, okay, now's an opportune moment to try and cross-step forwards in order to give myself speed. But we can't give ourselves speed if there isn't a steep part of the wave in front of us. So that is when we'll come off the shoulder. So hopefully all of that makes sense. If it doesn't, please leave me some questions in the comments part below. And now I'm going to look at the 5 ways that I can think of to set up nose rides, and we'll go through those. Now the first one, taking off straight into trim. Super useful if you live or surf at a point break and you know that the wave is going to do exactly what you want it to do. Okay, I never shout people off waves, but I think I was enjoying that nose ride. So what's happening here is I'm taking off and I'm thinking, okay, I'm nice and deep. Okay, I'm going to be going at speed. If I stay on a high line here and engage my rail, I can get straight to the nose. So as I take off, I'm thinking about leaning on my inside rail, about applying pressure, about trapping that flow of water underneath the surfboard, feeling that stability, and I can get straight up to the nose of the surfboard. We've got those visual cues. Remember I said there were sparkles? We've got those visual cues there. There's a steep section for me to travel through, and I'm going to get myself a nose ride. So, a very good method, not the method I use all the time, because where I'm surfing, we've got to work the way, I mainly surf at a beach break, we've got to work the waves a little bit harder, but a very useful method for surfing point breaks, as is this next one, the bottom turn. Now, I'm going to confess here, I don't have the best bottom turn, and I very rarely do big, deep bottom turns, but at the moment I'm in California and I've been watching the surfers at Malibu, and those taking off really deep do a big, powerful bottom turn in order to take off deep, have priority on the wave, and then generate speed straight into trim, going past or through those steep sections straight onto the nose. Okay, on this one it's a shallow bottom turn, the next one's slightly deeper, but essentially I haven't taken off at an angle, I'm taking off straight towards the beach. I move my weight back on the tail of the board in order to change direction, get myself onto trim, and I get myself a quick little nose ride. Now on this example you'll notice there isn't too much feathering in front of me, so it's only going to be a quick nose ride and then I'm back. Okay. On this example here I do take this nose ride a little bit deeper. I'm actually giving that wave a little bit of chance to stand up. You can see the feathering already starting to happen, the sparkling already starting to happen. Bottom turn up into trim and I get myself a nose ride. So again, very useful for point breaks. Now this is often what I'll hear coaches teaching surfers to do. It's not my favorite method. I actually think this is quite a difficult way to set up nose rides. But when we stall, we're essentially putting the brakes on the surfboard to then hit the accelerator very quickly. So I'm going to move my weight all the way to the back of the board, jam the tail into the wave, slow it down as much as I can, let the wave overtake me somewhat so that I can then accelerate through that section. Now you'll notice that there is next to nothing in front of me, so again, very quick nose ride. I wouldn't even say I'm that in trim in this one. This is more a nose ride towards the beach. Therefore it isn't very long, and I nearly fall off. I do fall off. And I somehow managed to then get myself into trim. That's much better. That's more the kind of nose riding I like to teach, or the nose riding I like to teach in trim, where there's a section in front of me and I'm traveling through it. Okay, so we've got a couple of examples there of bottom turns and of stalls. This is just going to be one more example here. I thought that was kind of fun, so I left that bit in there. My cutback isn't great. We'll go through cutbacks at the end. So what I have to do here is that, okay, that little movement there, that straightening of the front leg, sends my hips back over the tail, the nose is up and out the water. I'm stalling the surfboard in order to then get into trim and travel through that section and get a nose right there. So a couple of examples of stalling there. As I said, not my favorite method, so I don't utilize it that often. but I found a couple of examples for you there. Now, this is perhaps my favorite method to use where I surf. We are really lucky that we don't have crazy crowds most of the year. Maybe in Christmas time we do, but we can surf and we can get lots of waves, especially on the inside when everyone's all set up the back. So on this wave, I'm actually going to surf the wave and go to the left. But you'll notice that my board is facing the opposite direction. This is going to be what we call a faded takeoff. Okay, I'm burning off speed in one sense, but I'm also allowing the wave to stand up in front of me and get steep in front of me. Okay, I'm allowing a section to build on that side of me, and once I feel like it has, I then get myself into trim using the tail of the surfboard, and I can get a nose right in. Okay. I'll flip this one around for all you regular footers, and just because it's very strange to watch myself surf this way, but same idea there. I fade in order to let the wave stand up in front of me. So probably the method I use the most. And then here we're going to have a cutback example. So this is Coach Andrew, another surf coach here at Playa Guiones, and he can see that the section in front of him is soft, there's no feathering, there's no steep section, so what he's going to do is burn off a bunch of speed, take himself back into the critical part of the wave. What I think is he could maybe hold this cutback a little bit longer and bring himself closer to the white water, so that he's got more of a steep section in front of him, but nonetheless, he manages to have those sparkles just in front of him and get himself into a great place to nose ride, before he then sets up another one. Now in this example, I'm not actually going to get a single nose ride, okay, mainly down to 2 bad cutbacks, but I like this visual one just because this morning you've got a real good view of when a surfer's got that steep section in front of them, like now it's starting to stand up in front of me, and where I could have been. Okay, so had I have been setting up over here, I've got even more of this section to travel through. Okay, so I start to move forwards, I quickly realise that, I do a cutback in order to set myself up again, and I feel like I've taken myself deep enough. In the end, actually I haven't, and at this point I don't think I was thinking about nose riding, but more just about finishing the wave. Okay, and then just one more for you. Again, wasn't brought all the way to the white water, so it's probably not a hang 10, it's probably a hang 5 scenario, but I used that cutback in order to set up a nose ride. Yes, we do have a lot of fun, as the smile tells you. So, a couple of notes for you when we're thinking about this. As I went through those setups, 4 out of 5 of them require that you're comfortable maneuvering your board from behind the midpoint of the surfboard. A lot of times when I have intermediate surfers approach me and want to start nose riding, I often find that they're not comfortable turning their board, they're not comfortable controlling their board from near the fins. So that's something to think about. The other thing is we want to set ourselves up to surf through steep sections. So coming from behind them, we don't want to set up in the steep section and travel out of it. I think those two things to think about as you watch this are very helpful, and as you head out and start to try and get yourself into positions to do some cross-stepping and nose riding, those are two things definitely that you want to be trying to think about. So if you've made it this far through this lesson, that means hopefully that you liked this, and if you did, please do share it, because it's likely that other people will like it too. Thank you very much for listening, and enjoy your surfing. Thanks a lot.